Welcome to The Sideshow.
Well, welcome to The Sideshow. We have got a special week in store for us here. We are going to be focusing on two Peter Gabriel albums that we have wanted to talk about for some time, and we've got a side from each of these. Now, when we're going to dig into a topic like Peter Gabriel, we wanted to bring some heat. We wanted to bring some heavy fandom on board. So we've got a special guest for these episodes. Sven will be joining us to add to the conversation and insights, and get us all a little bit more in the know about these albums. So special week on The Sideshow, and for all of our Peter Gabriel fans out there, you're really going to love it. Mike, can you give us some insights on Sven?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Well, Sven and I have known each other for more than 20 years. We worked together. We were both lawyers for a law firm here where I live in northern Wisconsin. We also worked together at the Oneida County Courthouse for a number of years. And in addition to being, kind of one of the smartest, most articulate guys I know, Sven is a big-time music fan. And we have some common interests in that realm, one of which is Peter Gabriel. And so, Mari, as we were talking about, material that we could take on, Sven, I thought, would be a good addition to the discussion on Peter Gabriel, who I know is one of his favorite artists, also one of my favorite artists, and I would say a heavyweight in the music realm. And so, Sven, it's great to have you aboard. And why don't you tell us, because you're going to be leading the discussion on the first Peter Gabriel side that we're going to be talking about, and let us know what that is.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate you inviting me on here to talk about this side. We've been batting around my appearance on this show for a good 6 months, I think. Yep. And now this morning we are here to talk about my preferred side of what is probably my favorite of the Peter Gabriel albums, and that is his third album, released in 1980, untitled as were the previous two, and this one is often referred to as Melt. But I'll start with just a brief overview of Peter Gabriel, including his pre-solo days. In the beginning, there was Genesis, and Peter Gabriel met with his bandmates at a private boarding school in England, or as they call it, public school, and the most of the band members were in the school with him as well, except Steve Hackett and Phil Collins joined the band later. They were discovered when they were quite young. The record label initially indicated that they wanted to sign this band. They were attracted to Peter's voice, which is a somewhat. I think Peter has a fairly distinctive voice. I think it's an unusual instrument. He has sort of this range where his voice will go between two different registers and almost crack in between the transition from one to another. It sounds a bit like he's going through puberty a second time, perhaps. And on top of that, there's an interesting texture to the voice where I've heard somebody describe it as honey poured over gravel. And I think that's a pretty good description of what it's like to hear that voice. Genesis was very much in the prog rock vein. Mm-hmm. Their music is ornate. It is Baroque. There are some very, very long songs that they have put out. Supper's Ready in particular is I think it virtually occupies the entire side of an album with just that one piece. Mm-hmm. I think it's 23 minutes long, and so that is the style that they are working in. As far as Peter Gabriel's stage persona when with Genesis, I mean, he was definitely famous for bringing a certain degree of theatricality to it, elaborate stage costumes.
One might argue a large degree of theatricality.
Yes.
One costume was a red dress with a fox head. Another was bat wings protruding out the side of his head. There was another particularly unusual one that was a venereal disease called the slipper men. And
wasn't he one of the very early like leap into the crowd performers where, in fact, like when he first started doing it, the crowd didn't really understand that they were supposed to catch him. And he actually injured himself on a jump. He seemed from a performance perspective to be slightly ahead of his time.
Yeah, I don't know as though he did the stage diving during the Genesis era. I think most particularly I think that comes in during the fourth solo album, but I'm not entirely sure on that. But I think the part of where the costumes came from is, there are very long instrumental sections in the Genesis music, and Peter didn't play an instrument except for occasionally flute. Other than that, he was vocalist, and that left him with a lot of time on the stage, not having much to do to entertain the crowd. And so, in part, the costumes were that. I think it was also, I've heard him talk about just having a fairly reserved, introverted personality. This was just sort of, putting on a suit of armor in order to get up on stage in front of the crowd, because just being a quiet, reticent gentleman up there on the stage is terribly boring at a rock show. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where some of the theatricality came in.
Well, I've often thought that would probably be the hardest part about being a lead singer for a rock group. I mean, the idea, what do you do when like the guitar solo is going on, or what do you do when and you've got to kind of look cool. At the same time, you've got to be like interested in the music, but I can't imagine that from time to time they don't kind of feel stupid or awkward up there. Yeah. Much like when you're on the dance floor dancing and they decide they're going to go into like a drum solo, and then you've got to kind of stand there and figure out, do I stay here with this person I was dancing with? Do I continue to dance? Do I just stand here and clap? A lot of awkwardness in rock and roll performance, I guess, when you really start to think about it.
Maybe more in the folk vein, but the quintessential example of that is if you ever watch Simon and Garfunkel. Simon has a guitar to hide behind, but Garfunkel has the hardest time figuring out what to do with his arms during the performance.
Yes,
well, and one name that comes to mind where there's a lot of guitar playing going on without singing would be Robert Plant.
Yeah.
And, Peter Gabriel just wasn't the sort of guy who would, just stand there on stage, open his shirt, display his chest, and then kind of wag his dick at the audience.
Yeah.
So to speak. Yeah. And that wasn't the type of person he was. That wasn't the type of music that Genesis was playing. And so I'm not trying to oversimplify Led Zeppelin music, but Peter Gabriel had a much different sort of context in which to figure out what to do with himself than Robert Plant did.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he came up with, I would say, more interesting ways to join in the fun, so to speak, but given the types of things that he did visually and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, so Peter announces his departure from Genesis in 1975. This is as the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway album is coming out. They still have yet to tour that album, and they do tour the album post announcement. As far as factors that led to him leaving the band, his first daughter was born with some health problems, born premature. So part of it was family related. Another aspect that I didn't find out about until fairly recently is that director William Friedkin, who made The Exorcist and The French Connection, had become interested in the idea of collaborating with Peter Gabriel on film projects. Not so much in terms of music and score and soundtrack, but he wanted Peter Gabriel as an idea man for developing story. Apparently, partly, I guess this was influenced by reading some of the in a Genesis Live album. There are liner notes that's sort of a bizarre little short story about a woman in a subway, and Friedkin was intrigued by that, and quite understandably, the rest of the band wasn't thrilled with the notion of there being a lengthy hiatus while their singer goes off to collaborate with a filmmaker. Of course, I mean, Peter was always interested in film and certainly music videos, and later soundtrack composition became a major component of his career. But so that was there might have been an earlier time. I do remember that Mike introduced me to the movie Sorcerer, which is the movie that Friedkin eventually made instead of whatever he would have collaborated with Gabriel on.
Mm-hmm. Tangerine Dream did the soundtrack work for Sorcerer. No, I've read I've got a copy of the vinyl and the CD of the Genesis Live album, which was recorded and originally released right before Selling England by the Pound, and I won't recite the basis of the story, but it's interesting, and I can understand why a filmmaker would say, this guy's got some shit going on in his head that could be very interesting. And those two albums, Selling England by the Pound and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which were the final two albums before Peter Gabriel left Genesis, are both very worthwhile. I've spent more time listening to Selling England by the Pound. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is a fascinating album, can be kind of dense, kind of a lot to get through, where you just have no clue what's going on. But kind of the high point, certainly the high point of the Gabriel years with Genesis before he went off to his solo career.
I've listened to Lamb Lies Down many times, but I've never actually sat down and tried to wrap my head around the narrative that is trying to be presented there. It kind of loses me.
Well, some tasks are better left undone. Sometimes.
Yeah, but in any event, that it was an amicable split between him and the band. And after his departure, of course, Phil Collins takes over the vocalist role. The first album that was released post Peter Gabriel was Trick of the Tail, and from what I've read, that album sold as much as all of the previous albums combined. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of left to a little bit of a crisis of confidence on Gabriel's part, where he so much of the focus was on him and his elaborate stage craft and stage antics that so much press was about him, and everybody assumed that he was responsible for everything. And then after he departed, everybody assumed he was responsible for nothing of the band's success.
Which is probably a little unfair to Peter Gabriel. I mean, success breeds more success, even with departures of people. Certainly in the eyes of the record company and the resources you're going to get. After those last two albums from the Peter Gabriel, Genesis, they'd received a lot of cred from the record company through sales, commercial and critical success. I mean, much like, AC/DC Back in Black would not have come out to the success that it did had it not been for Highway to Hell right before it. Different lead singers that are there, but they were obviously able to leverage the success of the previous work. And I'm not in any way trying to talk poorly about the Brian Johnson, the new singer for AC/DC, but I would say that the success of that first post Peter Gabriel Genesis album had something to do with the previous success of the band as well. So it all kind of goes together.
And in my opinion, Genesis was a good band. Phil Collins is a very interesting drummer. Steve Hackett was a very skilled guitarist, not the Guitar Hero type guitarist, but he was a very skilled guitarist. Tony Banks was very interesting keyboard player, and Mike Rutherford, he interesting. He played bass primarily, but other instruments as well. Eventually had his own band called Mike and the Mechanics. So I mean, we're talking, these are some talented, good musicians, but I don't believe that any of the other members of the original Genesis just had the sort of inherent visionary qualities that Peter Gabriel eventually showed himself to possess. And there was just a unique talent that Peter Gabriel had that had really yet to manifest itself when he was a member of Genesis, despite the fact that Genesis made some very interesting music when Peter Gabriel was a member. And after Peter Gabriel left, I mean, they continued, Sven's comment about Trick of the Tail, well, things only got better. The first time that I knowingly, listened to a Genesis album was Duke, which came out more or less contemporaneously with Peter Gabriel's third solo album. And that had Turn It On Again and Misunderstanding, and it was a big commercial success. And Genesis continued on an upward trajectory of commercial success. They were big, and here Peter Gabriel's, he's trying to fight just to get, Games Without Frontiers on the radio and stuff like that. Now, I think Peter Gabriel eventually eclipsed Genesis' success, or at least matched it, with So, which came out in the mid '80s. But I believe that just as an artist, that Peter Gabriel was just a much more of a heavyweight than any of the individual members of Genesis. Although as a band, I'm not knocking them. They were a very interesting, good band, and remained so after Peter Gabriel's departure, which at the time was, not unlike, like Syd Barrett leaving Pink Floyd. A lot of people thought that Genesis just wasn't going to be able to carry on, and the reason why they were is they kind of took a more straightforward, moving towards a more pop-oriented sound. Rather than doing the more experimental things that Peter Gabriel continued to do for at least through the first 4 of his solo albums.
Mm-hmm.
So as I think I mentioned at the top, Peter Gabriel's first 3 albums were all just entitled Peter Gabriel. They have different artwork, but the same name appearing in the same font in the same spot on each album cover. And he's described this as he kind of wanted his albums to be seen as new issues of a magazine. And he also said that as he thought about his own record collection, he didn't remember titles so much. He remembered the graphic artwork of what the sleeve looked like. And then the final explanation that he had was, he likened some records that change logos and stress how new they are to being like a product like powdered soap. And powdered soap comes out and there's a big words, new and improved formula, and you use the soap and it's pretty much the same soap. And he wanted to reverse that and have very different content, but similar packaging. That might work well from a philosophical standpoint, but it probably does not help album sales. Yeah, and the label probably wasn't big on that idea. His first album was in 1977. It's informally called Car, and that album was produced by Bob Ezrin, who worked with with Kiss with Alice Cooper, but he also later went on to work with Pink Floyd and Lou Reed. But that was an album where, in fact, my view is that I don't think Peter Gabriel found what a solo Peter Gabriel album was going to be fully on either of the first two albums. The first, the Bob Ezrin one, then in 1978 was released the second album, and that is referred to as Scratch. It is basically an image of him on the cover scratching down and creating negative space in the photograph. That album was produced by Robert Fripp, and who did not think highly of what Bob Ezrin had done on the first album. Thought that Peter kind of got buried in that first album. First album has some fairly bombastic production, but it did produce the first album did produce Salisbury Hill, which is somewhat minor hit.
Minor hit, but one of the great songs.
Yeah.
Of that era, and certainly one of the great songs from Peter Gabriel's career.
Oh yeah,
in my opinion.
Yep. Very popular today.
Yeah, and the second album kind of has gotten lost in the shuffle. I like it; it's interesting, but Peter Gabriel has put out two greatest hits collections that do not put anything from scratch on there. He does not perform anything from scratch in any of the shows that I've seen or any of the live recordings that I've seen available. And Robert Fripp was somewhat critical of his own production on Peter Gabriel 2 or Scratch, saying that he doesn't think that he quite captured Peter Gabriel on that album either. But he does say that shortly after Peter Gabriel 2 or Scratch was released, Peter guested on a Robert Fripp solo album called Exposure. And on that album, two Peter Gabriel songs were remade, one called Exposure, and the other one was a remake of a song called Here Comes the Flood from Peter Gabriel's first album. And while the original version of that was bombastic and filled with orchestral elements and things like that, the reimagining of it, the remake of it on Robert Fripp's solo album was pretty much Peter Gabriel voice and piano with Robert Fripp introducing production elements. It's credited as Frippertronics, whatever that means. My understanding is it's a pre synthesizer tape looping technique. But that is the version of Here Comes the Flood that Peter Gabriel has performed live ever since. And that's what Robert Fripp says. That's the first time I think we caught Peter Gabriel, solo artist, on record.
Peter, the version of Here Comes the Flood on Robert Fripp's Exposure album is, in my opinion, vastly superior to the version on the Bob Ezrin produced first album. And the what's basically an instrumental track, Exposure, on Fripp's album, it's kind of cluttered with some Brian Eno background vocals, and one of the Roaches, female vocalists, did the vocals, and it's a little screechy, so to speak. And I think that the version of Exposure on Peter Gabriel's second album, on Scratch, is the superior version, because it doesn't have the sort of the background stuff in there. And that's a very interesting kind of distinction there. Which is the better version of the song, the Fripp solo or the Peter Gabriel, and it depends. But Here Comes the Flood. I saw Peter Gabriel perform live in 1987, and among other songs, he played just him at the keyboard doing Here Comes the Flood, and that is a beautiful song, a fabulous song.
So again, my view is that Peter Gabriel 3 or Melt is the first time for a full album that Peter Gabriel found his voice as a solo artist. It is more studio bound than what came before it. the second album is largely something that could be played, guitar, bass, keyboard, drums. You could recreate most of that on the road. Peter Gabriel third album is very much a creature of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a more political album. It's not going to be on the side that we cover today, but the most emblematic song that would illustrate that would be the song that closes out the album on the second side, Biko, which is of course about Stephen Biko, and South African anti-apartheid activist. Mm-hmm. And it's also built around African rhythms and includes sound samples from Biko's funeral, actually. Mm-hmm. The third album also was a change in how he approached songwriting. Starting now with rhythm and going from there. He would find a rhythm, find a groove, and then melody would come later, and lyrics would come far later still. There's interesting temporary tracks where you hear him singing in what is called Gabrielese, where it's just sort of this nonsense sounds, and that is good.
This, I was just going to say, this is fascinating to me to listen to this notion of, composition starting with the rhythm. I'm always fascinated looking at the creative process that these different bands utilize. If you look at a songwriting, say from the, Elton John, Bernie Taupin, machine of very popular music, that started with the lyrics. I mean, the lyrics were written, and then everything went from the lyrics to the actual song. If you look at a band like the Beatles, they were very, chord focused, right? On there was a particular sound and feel that they started with, and then they built out the rhythm, and then the lyrics were last. And it sounds like from, here we look at Peter Gabriel, and it completely, the drums, bass, rhythm piece first, and then from that feel we'll build out the melodies and ultimately lyrics, and sometimes not even take the time to write the lyrics. They're just like, the mumbling and that's fine, that'll be fine, we're really getting our point across. I think it's a really fascinating part of the process that these different acts went through to make music in the first place.
And you kind of distill that down, is that he, the basis for his songwriting was rhythm tracks rather than chord progressions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really what it came down to, starting with this album, and it had very interesting results, and kind of was that's how he was initially able, at least in part, to distinguish himself as an artist, was by that change of approach.
And he also, obviously, we were starting to get, at this time when they were making these albums, the true technology for him by himself to sit in his home studio or some of these mobile things and work these things out with the use of synthesizers and other types of digital technologies that were just coming on board as Peter Gabriel was coming spring. And then add on top of that this notion of bringing in more world music and sampling into it. And he was really trying to bring it all together. Like, these are all different ways that I can get what's in my head, out. And the ability to do that because of the technology he was really capitalizing on what was available to be able to do these things. And obviously he made it work.
Two things before Sven picks it back up. Because I agree with you that Peter Gabriel really was creating music, not unlike a lot of music is created today, where instead of having, a group of band members, 3 or 4 or 5 people playing off each other and jamming and doing things like that to come up with ideas, he was able to do it himself using basically a drum machine and some synthesizer type or samplers or whatever, that kind of equipment. But it managed to keep sort of an earthy, organic feel to the music because of some of the effects that he would add on to the music. And when it came to actual recording, he was still using real drummers to actually play the music that was going to be recorded. And so it didn't have that manufactured quality. The sound of the music was able to sound very humanistic, not synthesized, or not artificial.
So the producer that was brought in for the third album is Steve Lillywhite, who is known for working with U2. He did the first 3 U2 albums. He was immediately coming off of working with XTC, a band I'm less familiar with. But he also has collaborated with Susie and the Banshees. This was the first album where David Rhodes was brought in as a guitar player. He's been somebody who's been touring with Peter Gabriel ever since this album. Tony Levin, Peter's longtime bass player, has a minimal appearance on this third album. He's only on the third track on the album. I think it's third. We'll get to we'll do the counting later on. But as in talking about this album, he says that he did not set out to create a concept album, but in hindsight, if you were to say what the theme of the album is, he says it's the history of a decaying mind. And there is some fairly dark material on this third album. This particular album got him dropped by his American label. He was previously on Atlantic. They viewed the album as being insufficiently commercial. And the founder of Atlantic, when he heard the album, his question was, has Peter been in a mental institution? There is a song on side 2 that we're not going to be covering that is quite literally about being in a mental institution. So I think that question mostly comes from that. But I think fair enough as a question about you want us to sell this, that is not an unfair reaction to handing that album into the album, or handing that album into the label. Sorry. Peter Gabriel has a philosophy for creation of music and art in general, that it thrives on limitations. And he's known for sometimes setting forth some arbitrary rules for a particular project. And on this project, the arbitrary rule was that there's not going to be any cymbals, there's not going to be any hi-hat. It'll just be drums for the percussion. The philosophy that he has is that if you tell a creative person that they can do anything, that wide open mandate can be paralyzing. If I can do anything, where do I start? But if you tell an artist, here are the things you cannot do, then the artist starts to look for creative ways to get around those rules. And this kind of makes me think of the film industry during the Hays Code. There's restrictions on what you can depict as far as sex and violence in your film, so you have to find creative ways to suggest instead of outright stating. And perhaps that creates a more interesting piece of work than if you were able to just more bluntly and frankly depict what your first idea would be.
And there are good and bad examples of that when you look at films, as you know, the analogy that you use there. You look at some old films where they had to leave more to the imagination. It's very easy to argue that sort of updates of the same films where the code allowed for a little bit more explicit content wasn't necessarily as creatively produced or as effective. Then on the other side of the coin, you've got the difference between, say, The Longest Day and Saving Private Ryan. And, there was just sort of a power and potency to the later depiction of the Omaha beach landings. But it is, it arguably will result in a more solid artistic creation if an artist is forced to try to accomplish the same thing with more limited materials. Kind of, follow the German purity law, and you're going to come up with good beer. Sort of thing.
Well, anyway, at this time I'm gonna introduce what the album looks like. This is the cover for the third Peter Gabriel album, and like its predecessors, it is just his name with the image of his face melting, and this is artwork that is produced by Hypnosis. They also created artwork for, I believe, The Dark Side of the Moon. And they did Houses of the Holy for Led Zeppelin. Wish You Were Here for Pink Floyd as well. How the image was created was it was a Polaroid photograph, and before the Polaroid had dried, they manipulated and smeared the surface of the Polaroid, and that's how that is how the image was created. Just as far as my personal history with this album in particular. This album and a few others were kind of a beginning of me exploring music beyond greatest hits collections. I was not a huge music enthusiast when I was in high school, but in college I just started listening to I went to UW Stevens Point, and I listened to a local classic rock station, 103.3 I believe it was, and it was a fairly limited playlist, but it was a good foundation for here are some, it's not the smorgasbord is limited, but it's a few dishes that you'll be able to sample, and I would like to try more of this particular dish, and Peter Gabriel is one of the artists that I don't know as though they played much more than Salisbury Hill and Shock the Monkey on that classic rock station, but it was enough for me to want to explore more. And so I started with, and I came up during the CD era. So my first Peter Gabriel purchase was a greatest hits collection that it was called 16 Golden Greats Shaking the Tree. And Peter Gabriel's third album was well represented on that collection. But there was a particular hole because if I was, one of the songs that I very much admired of Peter Gabriel's that was not included on that, and it might have been strategically not included on that, I had to go buy "So" because the song "In Your Eyes" was not on that on the greatest hits collection, despite "So" also being very well represented on the greatest hits collection. So then I'm branching out of greatest hits and radio. And it was the summer between my last year of college and the beginning of law school. I was working in a video, music, and bookstore in Eagle River called Jabberwocky. No longer exists. It was a nice little store, particularly for a community the size of Eagle River. And
I was there. I bought at least one book from Jabberwocky.
Yeah, and I had. Quite by accident, ended up being sort of in charge of the CD selection, at least in terms of determining what section things belonged in. I think I earned that role by knowing that just because Stevie Ray Vaughan wears a hat does not mean he should go in the country section. But in any event, part of my responsibilities were I had been given an inventory of CDs that had been sitting around for a while and should go on sale. And on my inventory, it met the criteria, so I was able to put the first 3 Peter Gabriel albums on sale. I put those aside with a Post-it note that said, "Sven will buy these." And I don't know if that was a conflict of interest for me determining that they go on sale and I'm also going to buy them, but that's how I ended up in possession of these 3 albums. And so I remember listening to them, bringing them home that night, and it was just a major storm had come through the Eagle River area that day. And so I listened to these 3 albums with headphones, and 3 was most familiar of the because some of those selections were included on the Greatest Hits collection, and 2 I had not heard any of it before, but even though I had heard chunks of the third album, there was still sort of a general reaction to some. What is this?
Yeah.
It is certainly not radio friendly. Some of it is quite dark. If I had to introduce the work of Peter Gabriel to somebody who is not, if I had to introduce the music of Peter Gabriel to a normal person, I would probably not start with this third album.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say, oh, check out So.
Yeah.
Plenty of far more mainstream artists have cite Peter Gabriel as a reference. If I was going to try to sell Peter Gabriel to my niece Anna, I would tell her Taylor Swift likes Peter Gabriel, and I would definitely tell her that Harry Styles likes Peter Gabriel, because that's like being blessed by the Pope. And so,
well, the first time I knowingly heard Peter Gabriel was when Games Without Frontiers was played on the radio, off of this album, side 2, but off of this album. And I slowly started to get more exposed to this album and his other material. And it was really, you see the album cover, it's like, what's this about? Who is this guy? And he used to be in Genesis, and et cetera, et cetera. But, it's funny because one time and it wasn't necessarily a fair thing to say, but my mother, who likes, among others, Billy Joel, and she knew that I was big into different kinds of music, and I describe Billy Joel, forgive me, as a lightweight. And my mother sort of inquired, said, oh, well, who would you consider a heavyweight? And at that time, my answer was, well, Peter Gabriel. And at that time, she asked me, well, why do you say that? And I really couldn't come up with with anything that convinced her that she'd be better served listening to Peter Gabriel than Billy Joel, because she has not started, or other than what was on the radio, and she still loves Billy Joel, and that's probably the way it should be, this and that. But he is that is a good example of how, people who are used to music primarily from the radio as opposed to exploring it themselves. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but Peter Gabriel is an artist that you need to go beyond the hits in order to truly understand what their art and music is all about.
Well, I think the next step should be, I'm not going to say much to introduce it, because I think the opening kind of speaks for itself, but I think we should play a little bit of the opening track of side 1, which is called Intruder.
Let's do.
So that's how this album introduces itself to the listener. It's creepy. It's unsettling. And
it's menacing.
Good word.
Menacing.
Discordant keyboards. There's some marimbas in there. But what this song is really known for is introducing the sound of the gated reverb drum. And with that, this kind of became the sound of the 80s. You will hear this again in much bigger hits, things like Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight. I would think that, I imagine that the Bruce Springsteen Born in the USA drums are gated reverb.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're talking about here is a technique that was discovered quite by accident. As I indicated earlier, there was the no cymbals rule for this recording. So Phil Collins was playing drums for Peter on this track, and he was in a small recording booth, and there was a microphone for communicating out from the booth, or out from the where the drum kit is, out into the control booth. And the mic was equipped with a gating device that would allow sound above a certain level to come through, but sound that falls below a certain level would just get cut off. And so what this has the effect of is you have you have sort of a big drum sound that ends quickly. There's no echo, there's no reverb on the back end.
Yeah.
So you just have this sort of thwack that's over that's big, but it's over as soon as it starts.
Yeah.
So that this track introduced that and would come on to be used an awful lot during the 1980s. Again, creepy introduction. Go ahead.
I was recently listening to this. Actually, I think it was a day or two ago as we were getting ready for this, and I was listening to this. I was it was kind of at night before going to bed. I was just cleaning some stuff up in my office, and I had this on, and I had the album cover sitting there. So I'm looking at Peter Gabriel with the side of his face melting, and I'm listening to this song, and I was thinking, this is what it sounds like when your face melts. Creepy is a perfect word to describe how this comes out with the drums and the effects, and there's almost kind of this weird kind of King Crimson feel as it gets started that kind of pops its head around, but a really interesting sound. He had something in his head when he was putting this down, that's for sure.
Well, and I think it's an important point to make about the drumming that opens this song and the gated reverb effect that Sven described. The drummer on this track is Phil Collins.
Mm-hmm.
And a year after this album was released, Phil Collins released his own solo album called Face Value, which had a little bit of a hit called In the Air Tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that track is known for is where the drums kick in midway through the song, and it uses a gated reverb effect. And I am going to go on record in saying that Phil Collins copped that idea, which became very popular and well known from these sessions he did with Peter Gabriel.
Oh, if you're in like say you're at a basketball game and there's 21,000 people in the stadium and they play that song In the Air Tonight over the loudspeaker, when that drum part comes around, if you look around, at least 18,000 of the people will be doing the drums. I mean, obviously a very impactful drum technique that it's pretty clear he obtained this from these sessions that he did with Peter Gabriel.
Fair use.
Yes.
Fair use.
Well, he was there when it was getting created.
He played it.
Yeah.
So,
but the song is trying to get into the mind of a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
This is really what that's what the song, the lyrics of the song is trying to do. It's a psychopath who's going to go in and leave his mark on a victim for his jollies.
Mm-hmm.
It's creepy just sonically, but that's before you get to the lyrical content. I don't think it's included in the clip that we played, but there's early on in the song, slipping the clippers through the telephone wires, just in this sinister voice, where this is sort of a singer-songwriter as character actor. You know, a lot of popular music seems on its surface relatively semi-autobiographical or talking about relationships that the person has been through. Well, presumably Peter has never broken into somebody's home, and yet he's singing from the viewpoint of that character. When you listen to the song, is the character even there to steal anything, or is he just there because he enjoys it? That is deeply unsettling.
And the combination of the relatively sparse lyrics with the just incredibly dark tone of the music, it in an artistic way kind of captures to the extent that quote normal people unquote can attempt to visualize, well, what must it be like inside the mind of someone who does this? And even if you're not trying to understand, just to portray what, you know, just that sinister, almost glee, looking forward to what they're going to do to someone else. It is an unsettling track.
It is indeed. We have another clip from it. Why don't we listen to that?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Let me chime in, Sven, on that clip. You know, at the very beginning of the clip, as it's as the music is transitioning towards picking up the verse, you can hear that marimba. That percussion xylophone. Marimba, I believe, is the instrument. But it just and there's a little bit more of that. You know, before the track faded in, there's a little bit more of that marimba, and it really is the sound of a disordered mind. There's just it's a little, it's not real smooth. It's just kind of scattered, and really is it just captures, in my opinion, very well the sound of a disordered mind.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree.
And the lyric that you can hear, "Leave his mark," I think I might have referred to, or you can hear him. And I mean, just think about leaving that mark, leaving a scar that someone will always remember me by because of what I did to them. I mean, just it's a wonderful piece of art about a very dark, disturbing subject.
I did see Peter Gabriel perform this live in a significantly reimagined context in 2011. At that point, he had put out a project where he had reimagined some of his songs and cover songs by others in orchestral arrangements. And so he was playing at Summerfest in Milwaukee, and I went and saw that. And this song, much of the work that is done by drums, by percussive instruments in that reimagined setting, is done by string instruments in that orchestral setting. And it was, this song, the Intruder song in that live context, kind of gave off an Alfred Hitchcock vibe. The string arrangement kind of sounded Bernard Herrmann-ish, who did a lot of scores for Hitchcock movies, and visuals are always a big element of Peter's shows, and there was graphics projected on screens behind that had sort of that Saul Bass, Alfred Hitchcock opening credits vibe to them.
Where and that's a pretty big distinction, because this recording is more like a more twisted version of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, so there's ways to approach the what's being described in a lighter way, but he chose not to on this occasion.
Mm-hmm.
One other personal anecdote that I just remembered as I was talking about that trip to Summerfest in 2011. It just so happens that was the first day that I threw in the towel and shaved my head. was the day that I went to that concert. And I remember that I took extra precautions with my scalp seeing the sun for the first time. I really slathered on the sunscreen. But what I didn't account for was that sunscreen in 90 degrees is just going to melt. And so the feeling of this sunscreen dripping off my face and clouding my glasses, I ended up feeling very much like I imagine that I looked kind of like this album cover with the melting face.
Well, neither Mark nor I at this point have thrown in the towel, so to speak, but that begs the question: what is it we're fighting for?
Yeah.
And I don't know, but so where does the album go from here, Sven?
Yeah. The next track on this album is called "No Self Control," and why don't we listen to a clip from that?
Okay, let's do it.
Gotta get some food. I'm so hungry all the time. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop. Gotta get some sleep. I'm so nervous in the night. And I don't know how to stop. 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 Pick up the phone, I will call any number. I will talk to anyone. I know I've gone too far, much too far.
All right, this is a song with Robert Fripp on guitars, Phil Collins again on drums, again using that gated reverb technique, again featuring marimbas like that first song. There's also sort of this bubbling, percolating sound and backing vocals by Kate Bush.
Mm-hmm.
This is a song that evokes paranoia, obsessive compulsive. Peter himself describes this song as in periods of depression, you feel like you need to go turn on the radio or switch on the television, go to the fridge. Eating is difficult, sleeping is difficult, just a loss of self-control. Again, a dark song.
It is the subject matter, while not as troubling as Intruder, it really is dark, and I think you've described it and summed it up fairly well. That just that feeling like you're not in control of your own life is many people experience that to some degree over the course of their entire life, and some in more troublesome ways than others. And the lyrics capture that, but the music it's much less ominous or disturbing as the last track, and it really kind of gets to some of that complexity. It's almost that kind of House of Cards that a person can sometimes become emotionally and whatnot. And you mentioned Robert Fripp's playing on this track, and that beginning with the percussion, the marimba, and everything together is not unlike Lark's Tongue and Aspic era King Crimson in the sound. I mean, Lark's Tongue Part 1 from that album, this album reminds me of that sound with the interplay between the instruments like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on, setting aside very kind of fast-moving lyrics. I mean, the instrumentation and the effects, and there's just a lot going on, and a lot of spatial stuff from right to left. Very difficult to relax while you're listening to this song. This isn't, I just got home, let me get myself a drink and sit down in the chair and just let my tensions go away. Not choice number one for that kind of song.
Nor do you put it on at a party.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
The next clip that we have, why don't we cue that up? Features a little Phil Collins work on drums.
Okay.
And Phil Collins, for better or worse, has somewhat of a reputation of being a somewhat soft artist, particularly in his later years. He composed soundtracks for Disney cartoons, and I don't think it would be unfair to say that. Well, it might be unfair, but he's often regarded as Phil Collins is just uncool. But in this track, he is doing some interesting things with the drums there, and from my point of view, that kind of work gets you a lifetime pass, even if you later do some fairly sappy material.
Oh, I totally agree that Phil Collins did more, probably more than his fair share of fluffy music, but he did a lot of really good, interesting, kind of adventurous music. Not only with the original Genesis lineup, with the drumming he's doing on this album. He played drums on a number of Brian Eno solo albums. He plays drums on No One Receiving, for example, on Before and After Science. And as far as Disney cartoons, I think that Peter Gabriel did the closing music for the closing credits of WALL-E, yes, which was a Disney, and which was very, and that wasn't a lightweight song, and it was really very, very appropriate for the sort of green, environmental message that was being presented at that point in the film. I agree with you that it's that Phil Collins drumming on this track is wonderful work. I mean, it's good music, and I don't know this. That when I saw Peter Gabriel, which was also at the Marcus Amphitheater at Summerfest in Milwaukee, it was in the summer of 1987. He was touring following the release of the So album. And during that repeated, no self-control, there were these booms with lights on them that could raise and lower. And there was one on each side of him, and they were alternate raising and lowering. And so he was, Gabriel is getting things coming at him from above and below, and it was a very very impressive visual effect to go along with the music, which was a more pared down, version of basically the same sound on this recording. But I'll tell you, and I say this, I hope I haven't said it more than 5 times, but that concert was definitely one of the top 5 concerts that I ever saw. Mm-hmm. I mean, among all of the qualities that Peter Gabriel possessed as an artist and a musician, he was a fabulous. Certainly, that's the only time I ever saw him perform live. But that was a fabulous concert, and I will go down as taking the position that Peter Gabriel was a pure performer in addition to being a musician, mm-hmm. And was able to take complex material like this and produce it on stage in a way that was very compelling and a damn good show.
Mm-hmm. I've seen him a number of times, and each is very different from the last time that I saw him. The most recent time that I saw him was as recently as 2023, and he's still releasing material in ways that make it difficult for record labels to sell. When he was touring in 2023, he was touring an album that had not been released yet. He was touring an album that was one song was being released each month of the tour, and that was the approach that he took to selling that album and selling that tour.
Well, and Peter Gabriel's the sort of guy that after he generated the income from his successful material, I think soul was really the primary thing. He was not the sort that needed to get richer, and he took that independence that came with that sort of financial security and he went with it and wasn't so concerned about selling records as he was making what he believed to be good music, or music that touched his heart rather than the cash register.
The next song is called Start, and it is very brief. And I tend to think of it as not being a separate entity of its own, but rather being an introduction to the following song. But if you own this on CD, they are separated out as a separate track that you have to skip one to another. Why don't we play a little clip of that?
Sure.
All right. With that, we've played the majority of the length of the track that is Start. Instrumental piece feels very much akin to something that you might find from the Bowie and Eno collaboration on Low. One of the instrumental songs on there. You've got kind of a sort of a almost gothic sounding synthesizer part.
Good word.
Underneath, with a much sweeter sounding saxophone layered over the top of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that so far, although it's an instrumental, it's probably the most normal song that we've heard to this point. Kind of a progressive pop kind of feel to it. There is that kind of gothic, I think, is a great word to describe that, but that it does almost take on a feel as if it's from a soundtrack to a TV show or a movie that comes through. It's kind of an interesting, just different track, something that's interesting to listen to. I enjoy.
To me, this sounds like it is an alternative soundtrack to the movie Blade Runner. That's kind of the vibe that I get from this. And then I came to find out in preparing for this that the person playing saxophone is named Dick Morrissey, and he plays saxophone on the Blade Runner soundtrack.
Yeah,
There is a reason why that is reminiscent. Now, I've heard, as I indicated in introducing this song, I view this as mostly being a sort of an introductory segue into the next song on the album, I Don't Remember.
Let me cut you off there, Sven, before you move on to the next song, with 2 points. First of all, I liked your word gothic in terms of that underlying, and I don't know whether it's like a Fairlight synthesizer or what type of device is used, but it's like a more organic sounding mellotron almost. It just and so I like that gothic. I thought was a good word, and I, like you, I sort of look at this track as basically being an intro to I Don't Remember, the next track, but it's also maybe could be just kind of like a sorbet from these two opening tracks, Intruder and No Self-Control, which are both lyrically very dark and musically sort of, tense and kind of, making it hard to relax kind of music. And I Don't Remember is going to be a little different than that. And so another purpose for the track could be just kind of a palate cleanser before moving on.
Although I now view the start and I Don't Remember as being inseparable, I Don't Remember is one of the songs that was on that greatest hits collection so the first time I heard this song, the next song, it was without start. But again, now I view them as inseparable. And in other versions, in case the first couple tracks sounded too soothing, if you can imagine them in the German language. Peter Gabriel re-recorded this album in German, and on this version of the album, Start and I Don't Remember are consolidated into a single track on the CD. So he too came to view that as being parts of a whole. So I do view the start, as I indicated, that sax is almost kind of soothing. Maybe start is kind of like a calming hand on the shoulder after the first two tracks of the side. But then I think with the next track, I think that calming hand kind of gives you another shove. So why don't we play I Don't Remember, a clip from that.
Sure. Well, we've just went from soothing to Tarzan.
Yeah. We've got kind of this wailing, this yelping. I don't know quite how to describe the vocal intonations, and we've got some pretty abrasive guitar work. There are three people playing guitars on this track. David Rhodes, who's become Peter Gabriel regular, Robert Fripp, who we've discussed previously, and they brought in David Gregory from the band XTC, and he's the one who's kind of doing that dun dun dun, which is the sound of strings wound very, very tight, and then just slapping on the strings to the degree where there was some concern that, might I break the strings? That is what's creating that abrasive sort of chugging sound that's in that track.
I think this track you can really tell the Steve Lillywhite production sound more so than any of the tracks so far. You mentioned that Steve Lillywhite produced a number of U2 albums, including U2 War, with Sunday Bloody Sunday and whatnot, and also XTC. You mentioned the XTC guitarist performs on this song, and it's only a matter of time before I'm going to select XTC's Black Sea Side 1, for one of our regular podcasts. And this, it's just that sort of unique guitar sound, but basically simple instrumentation, in terms of we're talking guitars, bass, and drums and production techniques, at least at this point in the song. But this is kind of that new wavy, punkish, mixed with mainstream rock into a unique ball of wax that sounds like, of all people, Peter Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
This song also was an early experiment with Peter Gabriel using the Fairlight synthesizer to sample real world sounds, and then play them back, manipulating them on a keyboard. On this track, there are just the sounds of some bricks being banged together. That's layered on top. It's not a core part of the song. And then Tony Levin, who is usually Peter Gabriel's frequent collaborator on the bass. This is the only song that he makes an appearance on this album, and he's not playing the ordinary bass. He is playing something called the Chapman stick, and it's an unusual instrument. And I think that Mike, as a bass player, has some more knowledge about that instrument than I do.
Well, and Tony Levin is a fabulous bass guitar player, and he also, when he performed with King Crimson and in other contexts, plays the instrument known as the Chapman stick, and it's a very interesting sounding instrument. And if you've got a clip of a little bit later on in the song, we'll hear it in a little more distinctive way. But a Chapman stick is a stringed instrument, and it looks just kind of like the fretboard of a guitar, except it's a little wider. But there's no like head with the machine heads, and it at least that you can see, and it doesn't have the body of the guitar, where the person plays it or either picks or plucks the strings with their fingers, and it is more of a tapping and holding and pressing a manner in which it's played. And it has a very unique sound. It can sound like a bass or even a guitar, depending on how the strings are tapped or hit or manipulated. And it can sustain like a keyboard. It's a very unique instrument, and it's interesting to watch someone play it, and it's even more interesting to be able to watch someone play it and hear them playing it at the same time. But it's the only other person I've ever seen play a stick besides Tony Levin is one of the backup musicians for John Paul Jones, the Led Zeppelin bass player, who I saw perform actually as an opening act for a King Crimson show in Madison a number of years ago. But very, Tony Levin is a consistently impressive musician. He's played for a lot of different people. He's backed up Chuck Mangione, Paul Simon, and he was on Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, blah, blah, blah. He's played with a lot of different types of musicians and well regarded by all.
And next clip, I think this does something pretty interesting. Why don't we play that?
Okay.
And I chose this clip just because there's sort of towards the end, the song just kind of melts down into this amorphous mass where you're not quite sure what it is that you're hearing, and it kind of sounds like the cover looks.
Yeah,
is my view of that. So that's what I was going to say.
And initially it's sort of like Peter Gabriel is coasting on the I don't remember. Repeating the "I don't remember" line, but it does what it does is just what you described. It's sort of the music devolving, not unlike the memory of the singer. And when you hear that, what sounds like this very creatively played bass that underlies that is the stick, that is the Chapman stick that's being played, and that's how he was able to get that. Sort of make the notes move around and sound a little bit squishier than a conventional 4-string bass guitar will sound.
Mm-hmm.
The one additional thing I wanted to add about I Don't Remember is Peter's interest in film became an interest in music videos, and this was one of his early music videos that would get airplay, and if you can believe it, it's kind of unsettling. It is. It's a video where his head is kind of strapped into this Clockwork Orange type contraption, and there are people in white body paint doing unsettling things, and it's again a dark, unpleasant imagery based video, very much unlike the video that he's most known for, which would of course be Sledgehammer.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the words that at least one of the genres that I think of when thinking about I Don't Remember is, is this the kind of music that would later be called industrial? And a quote that I've seen by Trent Reznor of the band Nine Inch Nails says that the first time I listened to this album, it scared me, and I loved it for that. So it's been cited by an artist in that genre. So Peter's had effects on folks from Harry Styles to Trent Reznor.
Yeah, there you go.
And Trent Reznor is also now composing Disney soundtracks.
Yeah, so there you go. Full circle.
Well, and this song, it has that sort of abrasive, mildly menacing quality to it, but it's certainly a more uplifting, bouncy song musically song than some of the earlier tracks. And the I Don't Remember, even though it's kind of unsettling because the person is just I mean, it's not, I don't remember because I don't want to tell you. At least that's not how I hear the song. It's I don't remember because I don't remember, and what am I going to do if I can't remember?
Mm-hmm.
So it's we're not getting daisy chains and laughs here. We're getting troubled. You know, the sound of a decaying mind is really what we've been getting. He's made good on that proclamation.
The album does what the label says.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The next song on this side is called Family Snapshot, and I just want to briefly introduce this one before playing the clip. This is a song about a political assassination. It is told in the first perspective, from the first person perspective, by the assassin. It's a character study, like kind of. I think I indicated when we led into Intruder that this is singer-songwriter as character actor, you know, embodying a character, no matter how unsavory that character might be. It's an exploration of the psychological motivations of a pretty damaged person who, by all appearances, is attempting to or actually assassinate somebody during the course of the song. Obviously, this song is not an endorsement of political assassinations or assassination for any reason, any more than Intruder is an endorsement of breaking into people's homes and sniffing the women's clothing, as one of the lyrics in that first song indicates. Johnny Cash didn't really shoot a man in Reno just to watch him die.
Yeah.
The way that you've sort of set the table for Family Snapshot is spot on. And, you know, I mean, given what's going on in the real world at the time that we're recording, you know, this podcast, you know, it's a very real problem in our society, you know, but with that said, unlike Intruder, this song does just the tone of the music and the tone of the lyrics. There is more humanity reflected in the thought process of the shooter in this song than there is in Intruder. And you know, that's in a world where we can all, or at least the three of us, can agree that, you know, there is never justification for assassination, period. It's something that should be condemned unequivocally. But the lyrics here do characterize the shooter as someone who is not without what would otherwise be considered human emotions, and someone who's subject to envy and covet, and he covets what others have that he does not.
Also, I think interesting is the tone of the music. You know, I mean, we've had some pretty agitating type feelings coming from the speakers as we've been listening to this album. What I don't hear anger though as I listen to this. I hear sorrow. I hear, you know, disconnection. It's you know, to your point, this is storytelling. Some of the lyrics almost sound spoken. They're not. They're but they're close to the spoken word in the way that some of these come across. And the music in the background, you've got this soft piano that's playing. You know, I don't hear anger coming through as you might think or appear, considering the topic of this song.
Well, the perspective and lyrics of this song are very much based on a real world incident. The Assassin's Diary was something published after a man named Arthur Bremer tried to shoot George Wallace in 1972. His notebook was published after he was arrested, and this same notebook also inspired Paul Schrader to write the movie Taxi Driver. In any event, the would-be assassin of George Wallace was in part didn't really have a political motivation. He was exploring different people who he might target. He was looking at Richard Nixon's schedule. He was looking at George McGovern's. But it was decided that that George Wallace would be the easiest target among the candidates, and the timing within the day, he was looking. I'm going to act at a time where it maximizes the chances that this will make the evening news. And he was looking at, okay, if I do it at this time, I can hit the news both in Europe and America if I try it at this time. And again, not driven by a political motive. Now, I don't think the song is limited to that particular George Wallace experience, because if you listen to some of the lyrics, and we probably need to play a clip soon, but as far as imagery of the song, much of it is evocative of Dallas in November of 1963.
Yeah,
that we have a motorcade, we have somebody in a car with the governor, but the target is not the governor. Why don't we play the introductory clip on this song?
Sounds good.
The streets are lined with camera crews. Everywhere he goes is news. Today is different. Today is not the same. Today I'll make the action. Take snapshot into the light. Snapshot into the light. I'm shooting into the light. 4 miles down, the cavalcade moves on, driving into the sun. If I worked it out right, they won't see me or the gun. 2 miles to go, they're clearing the road, and the cheering has really begun. I've got my radio, I can hear what's going on. I've been waiting for this.
So in that second clip, we hear kind of, it's sonically very different than what we heard in the first clip. I think this song in general has a cinematic quality. It's painting with images, At the same time, cinema in the respect that there's kind of a 3-act structure here, where there's an introduction to the character. That's Act 1, and in here, the song kind of picks up a gallop quality, and there's an intensity to him preparing for what he's going to do, and it almost feels like an action set piece that you might see in a movie. As the motorcade is approaching and these steps are being taken to do what he's going to do, and then what's not included in the clip, then it goes into a flashback to the narrator's childhood, and I have somewhat mixed feelings on that flashback coda. Is the discussion of that he's this way because he didn't have enough attention as a kid? Is that too pat? Is that a monocausal explanation for a very disturbed individual, or is that something more? I'd be interested to hear if either of you have thoughts on that.
Well,
but go ahead.
Yeah, I think first of all, the notion that this song was written in 1980. And when you think about the public assassinations in the mind of the public in 1980, I mean, you're looking at Wallace and Kennedy are the two things that are gonna come to people's mind. And
John Lennon.
John Lennon was actually after this song was just after, right? This song came out, but. The insights, and nobody back in those days was talking mental illness and potentially issues around upbringing and that type of thing that would be involved in something like this. Now, several years later, when Reagan was shot, you really started to see this, and obviously around the John Lennon assassination, there was discussions around the mental state here, but this was written before that. I think there's different elements of that are much more relevant today. You talked earlier about how this shooter is concerned about how media is going to portray and communicate the assassination, and how he wants to burn this into the memory cells of users. And obviously, fast forward 44 years. And I mean, this is like just exponentially more significant and more important, and much more discussion about, how did people get this way? And Peter Gabriel's certainly presenting some ideas above and beyond just what the shooter is thinking in his head at the time. And going back, I think it's a well laid out, really kind of holistic look at what is happening here, with some pretty significant foresight into what we as society would be talking about these types of things years later.
Except now peak time viewing is 24 hours a day potentially.
Sure. But I think the notion of how things will play on social media, maybe the timing isn't important, but other things have become incredibly important for people that want to make statements above and beyond the issues that they're confronting in their own in their own minds. So I think for when this song was written and actually produced, I thought it had a lot of insights into things that more people take for granted today.
I don't, in answer to kind of the query that you threw out there, I guess I don't look at this as him kind of blaming his parents for, or blaming his upbringing for making him the way he did. It's more like that's just what he was thinking about as he's making the decision to pull the trigger. And Peter Gabriel was someone who had an interest in mental health and people going crazy. I mean, this is an album about a decaying mind, and just the tone of the song overall, and kind of the narrative structure that you were describing earlier. I guess I don't take it that way. Whatever Peter Gabriel may have intended, I don't take it that way. The song doesn't it's trying to reflect humanity, the humanity that surrounds a decaying mind. This particular song is sort of, looking at those aspects of the situation to some extent. And just this is someone who thinks about things in addition to the horrible act that they're in the process of committing. They also have concerns and feelings and other aspects of their person that is not unlike their fellow human beings.
Mm-hmm.
With that, the final song on this side kind of brings things in for a landing in a somewhat lighter manner. The next song is called "And Through the Wire," and it's kind of the closest thing on this side to just being a conventional rock song. Mm-hmm. And I indicated that first time I listened to this album, some of this stuff was an eye opener, and Through the Wire was much more conventional, and I kind of held onto that in the first listening as a life raft. That this is something to grab onto in the midst of all these darker, more troubling themes and mm-hmm. more aggressive soundscapes. So why don't we play the opening to "And Through the Wire"? So when this album was being played to the Atlantic label, the individual who had questioned whether Peter had spent time in a mental institution, this was the song he liked. But he had some notes, and he suggested certain ways that the song could be changed. And he was suggesting, well, if you do this and do that with it, this could be like a Doobie Brothers song. And that was not necessarily what the artist was going for. And so when the record label officials' visit was over, they kind of went the other direction with it and brought in an additional guitarist from a band called The Jam. And mm-hmm. that was overlaid onto the track and made it a bit more aggressive sounding. So,
mm-hmm. Well, the Jam was they were a very English, I think technically they'd be referred to as a new wave band, but they were a very punkish band, just a trio, guitar, bass, drums, and were fairly well-regarded artists back in those days. I think Paul Weller is the name of the guitarist from the Jam that played on this song. This is certainly one of the more conventional songs on the album in terms lyrically, structurally, and musically, and so in that sense, arguably it's not as interesting as some of the other songs. But with that said, this is actually one of my favorite songs on the album because of what he's singing about. And this mm-hmm. is more of a conventional. It's about a guy who wants a woman that he has affection for and wants to get it going on with her, and Through the Wire. And there are a number of different ways that these lyrics can be interpreted, and the significance of the wire can be interpreted a little bit more broadly than this, but it's sort of like we have to settle for talking on the phone.
Mm-hmm. That's how and
we have to settle for talking on the phone. it's like, boy, it's not like the old days where, people are becoming disconnected from each other, and and having too much communication on the telephone instead of being able to be present, to look at each other in the flesh and touch each other, etc. And and when you look at the way the world is now with social media, the internet, Zoom, and whatnot, it's as we Mark and I did a recent podcast on Ray Davies' 20th Century Man, and I believe the retort was, you haven't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
So I think what Peter Gabriel was getting at here was a problem in disconnectedness, or at least the obstacle of telephonic communication vis-a-vis real presence with someone you were communicating with. He was addressing an issue that was yet in its infancy, and was going to grow bigger and stronger and larger and more powerful over time.
So that's how side one of the third Peter Gabriel album, also called Melt, ends. And this was an interesting exercise for me, because I am somebody who discovered this music in the CD format, and didn't when we were first having discussions about doing this episode, I didn't even necessarily know exactly where one side ended and the next began. But it was interesting for me to go through and come to appreciate a side as opposed to an album as a discrete unit of music. And when despite the fact that there's very meritorious material on side two, I did not view this as having as a difficult call for me in determining which side is better and which side, and it's not a competition, but this side produced a lot of material for us to talk about, and I appreciate you bringing me on for that purpose.
Well, it's a great example of what, regardless of, if you're first listening to it on CD. I mean, this was a well constructed side, and it was certainly the order of the songs, and this was put together as a side. As we spoke of earlier, there's kind of starting out with these real kind of agitating, unsettling kind of songs, and they needed a reset before they turn around and moved into I Don't Remember. Kind of let's get back, kind of like calm down and lead us into this, and then transitioned into Family Snapshot and Through the Wire, again the most conventional of songs at the very end. It was a very well constructed side of music, and really enjoyable to listen to and to discuss today.
Yeah, when I first picked up this album, it was in vinyl form, and so I can, when we listen to this, after and Through the Wire, I mean, someone would have to get up and go over to the turntable and flip the album over.
Yeah. And,
and whether, whatever everyone else was going to do, run to the bathroom or whatever, in whatever the scenario was when the music was being listened to, that was just kind of part of the process. And this really was, it was a way to kind of, and let's say you just listen to the one side and you weren't going to be listening to any more music afterwards. It was a way to kind of leave the experience with something more to smile about, that, and just a normal, instead of these, we got a psychopath, we've got someone who's paranoid, we've got someone who's lost their memory, we've got someone who's been driven to assassination. Yeah, just what the heck, I want you. That.
Well, great conversation, guys.